At that time, probably the best company to work for in terms of software, Microsoft.
Was it different back in the days?
Let's create a technology and then let's hope that someone would want it.
Is it changing nowadays?
You move fast and you can fail fast, you can make decisions fast.
Apple became bigger than Google.
Also just really focus on the experience.
So do they try to replicate it themselves?
Money and time.
Top of the tech companies.
Hotbed for like investors and creators.
What are the disadvantages?
He would say our entire year of budget is like what he spent on sodas.
People live in the valley.
$15 million. And the company would go, no, that's not worth our time.
Why?
2020, right?
Let's start this conversation from one event in your life, which I found out on Vu's Facebook page, where you say that yesterday Isabella and I both quit our jobs to do something we love together, is to travel, and we are starting 3+ year journey around the world on a sailboat. As far as I understand, for a really long time you were working in the tech industry, right? Before you decided to travel and get to the other part of the world where we actually met. What did you do? What kind of background you have, and what exactly in tech industry was your occupation?
Yeah, I started off like my degrees are in computer engineering, which is pretty much hardware, basically designing microprocessors. And then had a dual degree in computer science. And ended up focusing more computer science because actually, I just kind of have that passion. You can create faster. Cycles for like microprocessors takes a year, 18 months, 2 years out, like architecture wise, and so it takes a long time. And I like build, see quick results. And I think software was where it was at. Matter of fact, I started out at Intel, and then I started there, and I like, wow, this is quite slow working in software in a hardware company. So I decided to go, at that time, probably the best company to work for in terms of software, Microsoft. And so I interviewed up there, got a job up there, doing something I thought was super exciting. And then so I went up there. And my whole career was pretty much at Microsoft after that.
So you were targeting those companies from the very beginning. That was your goal to get exactly
I think
into
I always knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I just kind of had a super passion for this stuff. And so you just put yourself in the right place, and if you know what you want to do, you end up you find the right project that way, So you got to work hard too. You can't. This doesn't fall in your lap. You got to work hard and show that you're capable, and then you can do what you like to do.
Do you think that working culture in such companies like Google, Microsoft, Intel, Apple, do you think it's different?
They all have their own cultures.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think modern companies focus a lot on culture. And Microsoft had gone through, I think with Satya Nadella, gone through quite a transformation around culture. And so I think, their unique culture and how they approach things are very unique. But I think at the base level of creating products, I think they're very similar. It's usually some derivative like waterfall and what is it called now?
Like Scrum.
Yeah, it's essentially agile sort of development, somewhere falling between those two things. Most of them are moving to a more agile-based development. Then I think most companies also are aware that they can't. It's actually quite easy to build or evolve an existing product, and so that's not very hard. And so that process generally is very similar across different companies.
Yeah.
Where I think they vary is how they come up with new products, how they fund new products. And I think Facebook and Google, because they were younger companies than Microsoft, that they had started this more allowing employees to come up with new ideas and then presenting themselves. And I think that sort of drove the industry. Microsoft does something similar now today as well.
Yeah.
All companies do that because I think if they allow employees to spend their time being creative, finding new products, new ideas, that's going to be the basis for new products in the future, right? And so I think in the U.S. you see a lot of that. I think where there's ample amount of funds to be able to drive products like that and have that time for employees to do that. I think that's super beneficial, and U.S. seems to have a lot of that.
Yeah, but was it different back in the days? Back then when you started your career with Microsoft? I mean,
It was totally different. It's totally different, yeah. There was not a notion of, it was more technology driven, a bunch of engineers thrown in of how like, let's create a technology and then let's hope that someone would want it, right? And so you had products that just a hodgepodge of technologies. But today it's so different. Like today people start off telling stories about what the life you would have when you build a product. Like what does it look like? Does it meet the customer's needs?
So
How does customers use it?
Storytelling core idea is much more important, right?
But it's also just really focused on the experience. And I think like we all have iPhones these days.
Yeah.
Apple's kind of epitomizes like how do they sort of do this? Like they're one of the best in the world really about it.
Yeah.
Think about the experience, what the customer you need, the customer wants, how to build a great experience for the customer, then put your engineering behind that and manifest that, right?
Apple became bigger than Google, bigger than Microsoft as well.
Yeah.
This is just personal observation.
Yeah.
I would say Apple focus a lot more on B2C businesses. So it's for the masses, it's quite a brand in a way that is very personal too, because your phone is so personal. And I can say about Facebook because Facebook is personal at a different level, but in a social level.
Yeah.
So it's not like what you need every day, phone you need every day. Microsoft focus a lot more on B2B businesses. Their backend infrastructure, and I mean Amazon rivals that, and with AWS and whatnot. Their backend infrastructure is very strong, and their server infrastructure is also very strong.
Yeah.
So maybe because they focus more on the backbone for a long time, and now they tried multiple times to come to the B2C business. So I think that could be one of the reasons.
I think Isabella hit on a lot of the big these big companies hit on the major trends, and so technology trends or customer trends, and so therefore they've ridden this to quite high valuations. I think Apple's kind of unique that that they were one, like I said, they've focused on customers and the customer experience, and they focused that on an area that basically had huge growth the last decade and a half roughly, which is smartphones and smart devices in general. And so with their focus on customer experience, hitting the trends, and also being more luxury for technology, they were able to both create huge volumes because customers want their product, but because they're a luxury product that had huge margins, and those margins drive to larger valuations. And so I think they position themselves really well. They're quite smart. Even now, as they proliferate smartphones, they still have pretty high margins. So they're set to dominate. Remember when I was working, we did a lot of stuff for smartphones as well. And I think I can't remember exact numbers, but I think Apple had 20% of the market share of smartphones, but yet 80% of all profits. And so it's it's a good business. They have a good business going. But I actually people will knock Apple because they have this very strong vertical integration and a walled garden kind of approach. But that's what really makes that product great. If you go on different Android phones, it's a nightmare. It's everything's kind of different. Some things work. You don't never get updates, and people don't understand.
Developing on the Android phone is a nightmare. The form factors alone.
So many.
A small company can never go for all the phones and styles and screen size and. Apple, you get 3, and you take care of all.
Because they control both.
They control everything.
Yeah, software, hardware.
What's more than when inside the phone is the apps that you enjoy using. And when as developer, as a company, you devote only your engineering team to a certain amount of development. And if you have to split your team into 3 platforms, that's 3x your cost, right? So what are you going to develop first? You develop Apple first. And then you develop maybe Android, the most popular phone, and then subsequently it goes from there. So it's an economy.
And that's why I think some of those things fail, and you end up picking the best phones. Isabella says. She, by the way, she did a startup with her friends, and so she was engineering manager, driving product development across a bunch of different devices. She knows this really well.
We'll get there.
In the States, in the tech world of States, is there some trendsetter and everyone follows them? Or there is just technologies being brought to the market and everyone try to adjust to this technology? How companies decide, okay, next year we all going for 5G?
I think something like 5G, it's a consortium of a bunch of different groups. And so I think everyone in the tech industry sees that better connections, faster connection is an important thing for the future in terms of products and development and that kind of stuff, and for autonomous vehicles or appliance of things. So that's all all necessary for faster networks. So everyone worked together on that one, and the rollout is of course the more difficult thing, right? You can always have the notion of a standard or spec, but the rollout across the industry is super hard.
That infrastructure is quite complex. I think that's what the phone is waiting for. for that infrastructure to be in place. Otherwise, it wouldn't be useful at all.
Yeah.
The point is to be instantaneous, fast, easy, right? If you don't have infrastructure, none of those can exist, even if your phone has it.
I think there's some companies that do set trends, though. I think there's small companies that do like 5G like over a year ago, but there was no network. But when Apple did it, you can see like now everyone's buying Apple phones because there's 5G is part of that. Apple probably kicked off 3G. I think when they initially launched their first smartphone, they really drove 3G because no one else really used it. Like no one cared about 3G because what do you need 3G for? Like you had like a really GPRS web browser, it had text on it. Like there's no reason for 3G. Even Apple came with a phone that had full browser on there. You can surf web pages. You're like, what? Yes, give me that. And so some companies can drive that. Apple, I think, clearly is driving for this wave right now. And I think, people fill that in pretty quick. All the smaller providers, not small, like they're pretty big, like Huawei's and the Samsungs, will also produce a lot of popular phones. But I think Apple's really creating that base.
From your experience, big corporations are trying to acquire some small startups, which developing some new features to see how they can bring it into their company or their product. So do they try to replicate it themselves, or they likely to buy this technology?
I mean, I think it comes like the decision of acquisition is probably very few people in the company actually decides on that, and usually it's brought up by senior management on a strategy that they have, right? And then acquisition versus buy just comes down to money and time, right? And so and people is actually quite a big important part of acquisitions these days, because talent is probably sometimes more important than even the things that they actually have. I think those are the variables you kind of consider. And so if you need something quite quickly, and somebody already has a great product, then you would acquire them. If they ask for a lot of money and you think it's strategic value to your company and they don't want to join, or they ask for a lot of money, then you could go build it and compete. And sometimes it's just sometimes you acquire companies just because you need the talent, and that's and sometimes it's best to have all three, like great talent, acceleration of time, and good price for the thing, and gets you a head start. So I think it varies. It's based on what your vision is, what your strategy is, and where does this acquisition fit into all that, right? And based on that, you just figure out if you're going to acquire, build, buy, borrow, steal, whatever it is.
Top of the tech companies, they all are from the US. There are like lots of startups in Europe, in Middle East, in Asia, but eventually the biggest companies, they all are coming from the US. Why?
I think the reason why is the US. The answer is the US is when it comes to this kind of stuff, when new startups, it comes to money. And I think the US is kind of this like hotbed for like investors and creators. And so I think it was just happened to be like US is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, the wealthiest country in the world. And so there's a lot of money to use to invest in companies like that. But the other part of that is too, is a little bit of culture. I think the American attitudes, there's no rules. You break through these bold, go do, go create. And that culture is, you see that in our crazy politics today and people's different beliefs. But when you have 1 million people, like 300 million people, all thinking a bunch of different ways and all driving forward and creating, doing things, you eventually things bubble up to the surface that are really, really good. And so with the combination of that and money, creates a lot of really great startups. And to be fair, maybe it's U.S. that does this, but it's from talent from across the world. So we draw great universities in the U.S., so a lot of people come to study there, and then when they come to study there, they come up with great ideas, and the funding's there. So it's a great incubation area. And so this is why the U.S. for the last, I would say, several decades has been that place for this investment.
Is it changing nowadays? I mean,
I think China's coming up quite strong. I think China. I've seen I think we had talked previously about this a little bit. Like culture in China has been, it's very restricted in terms of education, in terms of how they approached it. Lot less freedom to be able to innovate. And I think the last decade, that's changed a lot in China, right? And the government freeing their talent there to really just go tackle hard problems, with funding, with a lot of funding, has helped that grow so quickly.
Situation a little bit changing in Silicon Valley. People live in the valley, and still, you within the internet and all the possibilities of, especially of the experience of 2020, where people used to or become comfortable to work remotely from continent to another continent, you know, be in touch over the internet within the, you know, all the time.
This is what you do.
So that is why my question, like before, it was kind of American dream or part of success story to come to the Silicon Valley, found the company, and then, you know, grow from there. Do you think in 2021 it's going to be the same path, or it can be changed?
I think 2020 has taught us that, you know, distribution is probably a little bit better, like of wealth and talent and people. Actually, that's probably the best thing for the world overall. I think near term, there's an ease to going just a single spot. And it's not really thing. Silicon Valley certainly is one of those. There's some stuff in back the east coast of the U.S., like New York. There's certainly stuff in the U.K., some stuff in Germany, even arguably in Japan and China. All have like these pockets of places where people go. It's easier when there is a concentration of money that you can just go and pitch people on ideas, versus if it's distributed so vastly across the world, it's quite hard to know where to go and pitch an idea or get an incubation of an idea to happen. So I think near term, I think places like Silicon Valley are still important to have a place of where people gather, even support each other. Not even if it's not about money, it's just about getting together, incubating ideas and talking to other people. I think that's quite powerful.
What are the disadvantages?
Probably the biggest challenge right now, I think, and this global challenge, is talent.
Yeah.
It's like trying to find people who can come together and do work together. That's why those incubators are great. Like, you go there and you might meet 3 people and 4 people, and they want to join your effort and create something. So that's kind of helpful there. But you really want to, basically grassroots create a new company. It's quite hard because talent is quite expensive and very rare. And this is why the employment rate in the U.S. in the tech industry, the high tech industry, is like so low. Even now, even in this COVID year, it's really quite hard to find talent. And so. And of course, because with a lack of talent, lack of people, that means salary is also quite high, and of course that costs you more to create a company. So I think that's some of the challenges, economics and people, to create something in the Silicon Valley. But you also get a lot of money from investors, so this is kind of this trade-off. And so
you both have a little bit different experience, because Bella worked in more startup environment, and you worked in more
big corporate
environment. Or what would be, let's say, advantage or disadvantage for you? What would be advantage and disadvantage of startups, and for you opposite? What would be advantage and disadvantage of working for a big corporation?
I always love startup. I enjoy. Well, for me, working is more than work. Is I have to enjoy it. I need to like the people I work with. That's really important. And so that's the advantage. You move fast, and you can fail fast. You can make decisions fast. There's no red tape, and you say what you need to say, and then you move on, basically. That's startup.
Right.
And I love it. And for however many years I did it, I love every single minute of it. But the disadvantage would be money. You don't always have the amount of money. Like he would say our entire year of budget is like what he spent on sodas. For example, there were days like that. And then of course there's talent, because people, it takes a special individual to want to be in a startup, because they have to. There's people want different things, right? Some people work because they want money. Some people work because they want to be in a certain environment or culture, and some people work because they want some excitement of doing something. But in the West Coast, which is where we were, talents is so hard to find, and we're constantly fighting and trying to get ways to entice people to work with us, because we're a no-name, obviously a startup, and people would go for the bigger names like Microsoft and whatnot. So that's the disadvantage, and that's how the salary keeps going up. Salaries, options, everything. And you throw in meals and vacations.
The big companies are like food, your daycare, massage. Like it is a crazy environment. It's a crazy environment.
Healthcare is huge in
Microsoft,
US too. Like you have to be really creative in the startup to entice people, and that's part of the fun too, to be honest. But that's a challenge for sure when you're hiring people.
I think my experience, like, I was fortunate enough to have friends around that did startups and that kind of stuff, and either help them just for mentoring or advising and seeing like Isabella's company. So I felt like I had that experience in some fashion. I think the advantage for me, clearly the things that Isabella said, which is like, we're always well funded, and so you can always go do talents. Usually, if you have a great product, talent just comes anyways. And you have a big company that has 100,000 people, you can easily even guide within the company the talent you need. So those are quite big advantages. Fortunately for me, I always, like I mentioned earlier, I always look at the horizon. So we always end up working on incubating new ideas. So the environment I worked in was always kind of like a startup environment. We actually always had to go argue for funds as well often. So I think I got the best of those worlds. So I got the money, you got the funding, you got the talent. You got to go incubate new ideas. Later in my career, you got to fail fast. You got to try things, do things, fail fast, come back with new pitches and that kind of stuff. So it's very much a startup inside a big company. Of course, the disadvantage is like you got to persuade a bunch of other people. Either it's more senior management to back your ideas. So you just can't, as quote founder of an idea, continue on your own and make something happen. You got to persuade, and sometimes at some point they cut your funding as well, right? And then you're like, that's done. Even if you think it's still worthwhile pushing forward some things. Many times we would incubate idea, or we had a business that was like making $10 million a year, making money, like revenue, making money, and $15 million, and the company would go, no, that's not worth our time. We get steal all these people back, put them somewhere else, and maybe make us $1 billion. So it's kind of interesting economics. I'm like, if I start a startup, $15 million of profit is a huge amount of money, and people will be very excited. And so it is a very interesting dynamic working in a big company, doing that kind of stuff. And so I think, would I trade it and go to startup? I think, matter of fact, our journey now is kind of more of a startup environment, like the way we think about things, how we connect with creating products. It's distributed startup. That's what I'd probably do next. But I'll probably not only do tech, so I'll probably do a bunch of other things as well. But that's, I'd love to try the other side of it. But I think I've been pretty fortunate working in a big corporation that allowed me to do a bunch of different things.
In September 2017, when you wrote that you quit, you left.
We both quit our job officially.
The idea was just to really take some time for ourselves, and explore other passions like sailing, or like we love doing hiking and trying to explore new areas. And
why now? I mean, why you decided to do this journey these couple of years, 3 years ago? I
kind of have this interesting philosophy about this. 2020, right? So your first 20 years, essentially, you're training and learning. Your next 20 years is about building a career and building wealth. Essentially, if you have, that journey, if you don't pause, your third set of 20s, you're never going to be able to enjoy life, because you're going to constantly be working.
Then it becomes the next 40 versus the next 20.
I remember very early on, somebody told me what do you have? You have health, wealth, and time, right? Health, wealth, and time. When you're young, you only have time and health, but no wealth, because you're a kid. And then when you're early, when you're like that 30 to 40 years, you have like a lot of health and money, but no time, because you're working, right? And then when you're older, you have wealth and time, but no health.
No health,
right? Because you're older, and you're gonna. So you gotta break that chain, and I think that 40-year that age, it's the perfect time to break that chain and take a little time for yourself. And sometimes in that discovery, you might find things you like better.